And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cyrus Webb Presents. I'm Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us as we're kicking off a brand new week and a new year. So welcome to 2022. And what better way to do it than to talk about something that all of us have had to go through or are going through, and that is transformation or change. I'm excited to welcome back my friend, Dr. Teresa A. Smith, or Dr. TAS, as we call her here, to talk about her book. You guys see their transformation. We have been going through, if you remember, in 2021, we went through 5 of the messages. Hello to you guys. Appreciate you all being with us. There is Dr. TAS, and go ahead and bring her in. But you may remember we covered 5 of the topics in her book, 5 of the messages. We're going to actually do a recap for you guys today in this hour broadcast. So I'm really excited about this. Our first time we've done this. Dr. TAS, how are you?
I'm great, Cyrus. How are you?
Good. You look amazing as always.
Thank you.
Well, look, I was just telling them that we're going to be doing a recap of the first 5 messages from your book, Transformation. We're going to also remind them how they can get their own copy of it, which is on Amazon right now in print, as well as a Kindle edition. I'm going to remind them of that. And you have some great things coming up this year as well around the book, including a special group you're forming. We'll be kind of bringing them into that as we're going throughout this year. If you guys are new to Dr. TAS, a couple of things I want to remind you of that you can do. If you'll look right here, there's a drop-down arrow. If you're not following Dr. TAS, make sure you guys click on that drop-down arrow. You can follow her here without even leaving the broadcast. Also, there's a bubble down below with a question mark. You'll notice by Dr. TAS, if you click on that bubble with the question mark, you can be able to write your question in for Dr. TAS as we're going throughout our conversation today. We're going to cover a lot of ground, but we definitely want to get you guys involved, so feel free to be able to do that. So here we are, Dr. TAS, beginning a brand new year. And when you and I were setting this up, I mean, we were like, this makes perfect sense to kind of do a recap of how we kind of ended 2021 and discussing the first 5 messages. I want to talk about this journey for you, though, as we kind of talk about transformation, because you've been dealing with your own transformation, which shows it's continuous. Is that one of the big takeaways, you think, Dr. TAS, from this book, that we are always transforming?
It is, Cyrus. I was saying to someone earlier, when I was a little girl, I fell in love with the term metamorphosis. And for some folks, they know I'm referring to the Incredible Hulk, Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno. And for me, the idea of change just resonated with me as a little girl because I was suffering through at that time, and I use the word suffering through, how do you deal with incest and being a survivor? And so when we fast forward and we're looking at transformation, as you said, is always a continuous process. And for me, 2020 has been truly about transformation. You know, I wrote the book for myself. You know, we were going through the 5-week, we were going through 10-week series. And then at the 5th week, I was like, Cyrus, I need to take a break. I had to go into time out because I realized every week that we met, I was actually transforming. And it was as if I was reading the messages for the first time. And I'm going to be honest, it was a bit overwhelming. And so I had to continue to work through it, but I had to work through it at my own pace in order to wrap my mind around all the things that were being revealed to me.
Yeah. Courtney, hello to you. I see you. Courtney, glad you're feeling better, man. Congratulations on a great 2021. Glad to see you. Prairie Dodgers, Cindy, good to see you. Sheila, glad you could join us as well. For those who are just coming in, my guest today is Dr. Teresa A. Smith. We call her Dr. TAS around here, but she's the author of this book, Transformation, which is her 3rd full-length book. It came out in 2021 at a time where I think all of us were going through some type of change or adapting in life. But her book has 10 messages in it to kind of help us kind of go through transformation, but also realizing that it is a continual process. Now, this is where this gets complicated for some people, TAS, because they're used to saying, okay, there's a problem, we fix the problem, and we don't deal with that anymore. How difficult has it been for you to get people to see if they just heard you say what you said? You wrote the book and you're still transforming. How difficult has it been for you to explain to them that they will never get to a place of completion as they transform?
You know, I was meeting with a friend, and I call him a friend because we've been working through the book, and they said to me that this work is hard, and I didn't understand. I said, what's hard about it? And he said the reflect and connect. And I think that's the part that we have to wrap our brain around. And I think that's what was happening with me as we were working through the series, because I was reflecting and then I was connecting. And as I began to connect, I actually had revelations that I'd never had before. And it was once I began to break through that revelation, I had to step back, because the revelation that I got really, how can I say this? It changed the underpinning of who I was, because I understood how I had utilized something as a coping mechanism and I never realized it. And so now, having realized that, when you talk about continuous work, we want something to be simple. It's like, give me an antibiotic, I take it, the infection's gone. But that's just not the way it is when we talk about real life. We're constantly changing, because just as soon as you think you've got it, then something else happens, and then you realize, oh, I don't have it. So, that's what makes it such a challenging thing, but it's also the rewarding thing about it. Because really, if life was the same and we knew if we could predict what the next day was going to be every day, pretty soon it would get boring to us.
Yeah.
And we need the excitement to shake us up.
That's true. That's true. Tanya, thank you so much for that follow. I appreciate that. King, hello to you. Hope all is well with you, King Titus. So I want to kind of, for those who are new to your book, Taz, I want to kind of walk them through what they get. So as I mentioned, there are 10 messages in this book, okay? But it's more than just the message. What she does with every message, it's really 3 components. There's a message, then there's what she calls a gleam recap, and then we have you just heard her mention reflect and connect. So let's go ahead and start, Taz, with the first one, which kind of sets the stage for what we just talked about. The first message is change is challenging. So this is not an easy thing that we're doing. Now, one thing Taz also does, being a person of faith, is she also uses scripture in with her messages as well. So I think you guys will be able to see the connection there as well. If you're not as familiar with scripture, think about it as great illustrations or great examples of the themes that she's discussing. But I want to talk about those 3 words, because those 3 words are powerful, Taz. Change is challenging. Now, the funny thing is, we tell people that change is good. So how do you put those 2 things together? It's good, but it's not easy. There will be some challenges along the way.
Well, it's good because we have to change, because if we don't change, we remain stagnant. I'm trying to think of something that's not biblical. Right. Oh, Michael Jordan. Mm-hmm. Michael Jordan, and I'm gonna mess the story up, guys. So don't get upset. Even though I'm North Carolina, and I'm a Tar Heel. North Carolina, I'm a Tar Heel. Yeah. But I believe Michael Jordan did not make the basketball team for a couple of years. But he wanted it, so he practiced. And he practiced and he practiced and he practiced. And then he eventually made the basketball team. And we fast forward decades, we know Air Jordan. So again, he had to make the change. Now, was that difficult for him? Absolutely. Was he heartbroken? I'm sure he was crushed when he wasn't making the team, but he didn't give up. So the change, it was challenging, but it was worth it once he got on the other side of it. So that's the reason you have to look at it. It's rewarding, but in order to get it, we're going to have to go through something. And that's the part of the change that is so challenging, because it may not be that the work to get there is the hard part, but once you've gotten it, what do you have to give up in order to maintain it? And that may be the challenging part for you.
Exactly. Taylor Hicks, hello to you. Taylor, we have to get together, man. Congratulations on another great year. Last year. You write this in message 1 under Change is Challenging, Taz. Change requires us to accept that we are not perfect, that we've likely made some prior decisions, and our behavior may not have always been productive, and that we are ultimately responsible for our outcome. And again, it's so easy for us, and we saw it a lot in 2021, unfortunately. People try to blame other people for their actions or blame people for why they were doing certain things, when really we have to look at ourselves. And that sometimes, looking at that beam in our eyes, and we're trying to take the straw to somebody else.
Yes.
It's not easy. But talk to us in our audience about that and why you chose that for this first message, Taz. Why is it important for us to remember that in order for us to truly change, we have to admit our own stuff?
Well, who wants to admit that they're wrong? I
Yeah.
mean, nobody wants to. And, it goes back to the humility that we talk about later in the book, but you have to be humble enough to understand that you've made mistakes and to share that publicly. What I found is, I said this to someone once, that a leader, one of the marks of a good leader is the ability to say, or the ability to admit when they're wrong.
Yeah.
And one of my mentees came back to me and said that's what I'd said to her. And I had said it, but that comes from this. Nobody is perfect. And as long as you believe that you are perfect, then if you think about it, being perfect means there's no reason to change.
Yeah.
And there's only been one perfect being to walk the earth. So the rest of us are flawed. And that's okay, because that's part of the design, that we are to be flawed so that we can understand the importance of change and then sustaining that change. So to me, in order to begin anything in life, you've got to be able to admit that you're wrong. Now, I will say this, Cyrus, people admit that they're wrong in different ways. We would like for somebody to just tell us, I'm sorry, I did this the wrong way, I shouldn't have done it that way. But we've got to realize everybody is different. And sometimes the way people will admit that they're wrong is they change their behavior. So if you're thinking that the person's going to come and apologize, well, maybe you're that type of person. But the other person may not come and apologize, but their behavior may change. And that's how they're saying to you, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done it. I'm going to make it up to you. And they change their behavior. So we have to remember that everyone is different. And that gets at the change too, so that we are receptive, or our eyes are open and our ears are open to see when someone is actually changing how they behave.
Yeah. Prairie Dodger Cindy says, agreed. Hello to you, Butterfly Thoughts. Kimberly, good to see you. Mario, hello to you. Man, I hope all is well with you. For those who are just coming in, you're watching Cyrus Represents. We're here at Dr. TAS, Dr. Teresa Smith, discussing her book, Transformation, that's out now on Amazon. It's 10 messages to really help us to understand the work that we all need to do and kind of help us through the process of doing it. And that's message one, a change is challenging, Dr. Taz. The Gleam recap says, change the things in your life that negatively influence your thinking and behavior. So that, again, causes that self-reflection. How important has that self-reflection been for you, even after the book's been released?
Cyrus, the self-reflection here is so important. Changing the things in your life that negatively influence your thinking and behavior. I'm trying to see just how transparent I'm going to be. We got an hour, though. We got an hour, right, Cyrus?
Right, exactly.
This has been very important to me. Negatively influence your thinking and behavior. Now, when you read that at first glance, you think negative is something that's bad, something poor, something that we shouldn't want to have, because typically that's what negative is. But, when I look at this from a different pair of lenses right now, things in your life that negatively influence your thinking and behavior. The thing that could be negatively influencing your thinking and behavior could be positive. It could be a positive thing. It could be positive people, but they're not positive for you. It could be a positive thing, but it's not positive for you. And if it then makes your behavior negative, then you have to regroup. And that's where I am. And that's where I was. That was 2021. This is 2022. Right. I'm a new woman now. Because it's a great thing. It's just not a great thing for me. And once you begin to understand that, because again, we get typecast to think of negative things. I'm thinking literature. I'm thinking when I was a little girl, the black and the white. Black is negative. White means purity. Well, it's not that clear. Things can be great, but they're not great for you. And you don't even understand that it's influencing your behavior or your thinking. Because what's more important than the behavior is the thinking, because the thinking drives the behavior. The thinking will drive the heart also. So therefore, when we think it's great, and it is great, not great for you, then we act a certain way. And I remember a friend of mine saying to me, and if she hears this, she'll know who she is. I just really didn't, I just got to the point I didn't like you. And I said, had it gotten that bad? She's like, yeah, it had gotten that bad. And I said to her, and I didn't understand it then, but I understand it at the end of 2021, because she said this a couple years ago. I understand because what was so negative for me, I didn't really understand it was negative. So therefore, it was driving my behavior, and it changed who I was at the core. And so now looking back, I understand that when you're talking about negativity, it doesn't always come the way we think it's going to come. It's going to come positive. It's going to be that sheep. It's going to be the wolf rather in sheep's clothing. But you got to be able to decipher that it's negative for you. Might be great for the other person, and you wish them well. But you have to remove it when it comes to you.
Wow, love that. Great message. Great message. I'm going to just use one of the reflect and connects for this first message, Taz, and that's this one. Examine the outcome of the decisions. It ties in perfectly with what we were just talking about. So again, keep in mind, if you're just finding out about Taz's book, and it's available right now on Amazon, she gives you the message. Then she has what she calls a gleam recap, like it's almost a sentence of a summary, and then she gives you an opportunity to reflect and connect in these prompts. So let's talk about that in this case, Taz, for this one, because again, the outcome of our decisions, again, a lot of times that's what we don't think about, right? Is what this action is going to lead to. What do you want our audience to think about when it comes to that and this idea of change being challenging?
Well, I think the first thing, if I'm going to be really honest with you, the first outcome is going to be probably emotional overload. Because anytime you're making a change, your emotions have to adjust to the new world that you're living in. And sometimes we don't adjust fast enough. And so we go back into the familiar. And so the first thing is going to be an emotional, almost like an onslaught, like a tsunami. And that's okay, because that means you've begun to do the work. And actually, you're on your way to the other side of it. But also, once you have begun to look at the issue and you're beginning to make the change, you're going to reach whatever the desired outcome is. Let me back that up, sorry. So I've been dealing with this thing of I need and I won't.
Go ahead.
You may not get what you, how have I been saying it? You may not get what you want, but you're going to get what you need. And I want you to play with me, guys, because we want a lot of things in life, okay? And we think if we get what we want, we're going to be happy, we're going to be satisfied, the world is going to be our oyster, everything's going to be great. But if you are really honest with yourself, you get what you want, but you still have a crevice that's empty. That's because you got what you wanted. You need to get what you need. So when we talk about that outcome, you're going to get what you need because I've gotten what I needed, not what I wanted. I wanted something else, but he gave me what I needed. So that was the outcome. Could I have said that 6 months ago? No, because I thought I knew what the outcome was going to be. It was what I wanted, not what I needed. Yeah. And now that I truly am beginning to understand the difference between our wants and our needs, when you look at that expected outcome, the expected outcome needs to be what you need. Not what you want, which means you're really going to be in the dark still. And that's uncomfortable because we as human beings like to sort of know where we're going, what's going to happen. So understand because you're making a change, you're going to still be in the dark, but that's okay. You're going to have the emotional onslaught. That's okay. But you will get what you need. Now, the question then becomes, will you understand that you've gotten what you needed? And then after getting what you need, will you understand how to utilize that to get where you're going? Yeah. And I know it's kind of like, what is she talking about? It's like a riddle, because life is a riddle. It's a labyrinth, and we're being weaved through it every day. Mm-hmm. So you're wanting something to take your hand and then weave you through it, because it has to be beyond us. Because remember, we're looking for what we want, not what we need. And so, that gets us nowhere. I'm sorry, son.
No, you're fine. But it leads us all to, Taz, how we began this first message, and that is it's an ever-ending process. It's never-ending. We will always keep having, because if we're not stagnant, we're going to have to keep making those decisions, those choices, and deciding, am I going to stay here? Am I going to stay at this job? Am I going to stay in this relationship? Am I going to stay, in this situation with this business? Those are decisions that we have to keep making as we go through our lives, and the choices will then, determine by the outcome, what we're doing. So that's message one. Change is challenging. So no matter what kind of change we're talking about, Todd has let us know it's not going to be easy, but she follows that up in message 2 with talking about free will. So, Todd, if you say change is necessary, that makes it seem like it's something we have to do. How then you then say that we have the free will as to how we move forward toward that change?
Well, Cyrus, we really already started talking about it because we talked about that expected outcome, and I talked about needs versus what we want.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think about the groundhog effect. We keep doing the same thing over. We do the Einstein, insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different outcome. And so at some point, you got to be the hamster and you got to get off the wheel. And that is where that choice comes in. Or are you just going to keep doing the same old thing? And so for me, choice it's hard. It's hard. Because when you make a choice, when you make an informed choice, you're either choosing to continue with something or you're making a decision to step out of it. And when you step out of it, you don't know what you're stepping into. And so for some people, and I've been one of those people, it's easier to stay in it because you know what it is versus getting out of it. And so that's that dichotomy, the idea of free will, but is it a choice? And then with the willing obligation, sometimes we get ourselves in stuff and we feel obligated. Yeah. But the question is, are you the only person obligated? And lots of times you're the only person obligated. The other people are not obligated to you.
You talk about in this about the fleshly and the spiritual, Taz, in this message of free will. You say this: as human beings, we must learn the lessons that our efforts provide in preparation for the future circumstances we will encounter. This becomes the free will learning cycle. And again, it goes to that idea of this being something that is continual. So how does that then tie into the Gleam recap there, Taz? Your decisions will determine your future.
Well, going back to what you just said, this becomes the free will learning cycle. Cycle meaning it's circle, So therefore, when you talk about your decision, either your decisions are going to be favorable, which means you're then going to step out of that cycle, or you're going to continue on that same wheel until you learn your lesson. And for me, that's the way life has been. Some lessons I've learned quickly, and some lessons I thought I learned them, and then flash forward, 10 years later, I got to learn that lesson again. Yeah. And so that's the reason why the decisions are so important, because they really do determine our future. But at the same time, Cyrus, I think you can't make a decision, and this is going to sound so ambiguous, but you can't make a decision without thinking about the need, even though you may not know what your need is. Because if you're always making the decision out of your wants, then you're perhaps more inclined to stay on that cycle where you're still trying to learn a lesson and you can't get off of that particular cycle or that particular road. Or let me make it more concrete for folks. You keep meeting the same type of guy. You keep meeting the same type of woman. You can't get out of those types of relationships because, again, you're still on that same road and you haven't gotten off of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. Hello to you, Robin. Good to see you. Set Goals and Slay. I like that name. Good to see you. Dennis says, Taz, change doesn't come without a decision to take action. Take the action and don't look back. And I think that's the thing, too, Taz. It goes to what really is we're connecting these two together, these two messages of change being challenging and then free will. Remembering that, again, that it's up to us either way. Whether we choose to stay stagnant and life continues to happen to us instead of for us, or we make a change and then, we have to deal with the evolution that comes with that change. It really is on us to do something. In either way, we're making a choice. We're either choosing to stay where we are, which some people look at as a place of safety. I've done that. You think, okay, well, I'm good here. I don't need to rock the boat. Some people may say, hey, this job works. It may not be what I love or what I'm passionate about, but hey, I know, it's going to be here. But I think that's the thing in making those decisions about realizing what's challenging, but also knowing we have the free will whether we choose to do it. That's the thing. In the Reflect and Connect, the one I wanted to mention, I thought this was an interesting one for those who are just new to your book. Summarize the positive and negative outcomes of the decision. I love that because, again, we're then, again, taking the onus on us that, okay, I know if I do this, this is going to happen or may happen. Or if I don't do this, this, may happen or may not happen. Why is it important for us to do that, to actually be able to look at it? And let me ask you this. For people who are visual like me, would you suggest writing it down?
Cyrus, I do, I do it multiple ways. And, writing down now could be on your phone. But I think it's important to always look at the pros and cons, the good and the bad that comes from anything. And certainly from these decisions that you're making, and even before you make the decisions. Because sometimes if you can look at it, it may help you to determine what's the best decision at this point. It may not be the final decision, but it may be the first part of a decision. And so also when you write it down, it's real. If I just keep it in my head, it's in my brain. But when I put it on paper, or if I put it in my phone or my iPad, whatever, it's real then. Also, you begin to take some ownership. And that's important when you're doing this sort of work because you're only accountable to yourself. You're not accountable to anybody else. And this is a way of making sure that you remain accountable to yourself, but also, because I always say this, don't beat yourself up. Some days we're going to be at 110%, meaning we're going to be on it. And then there's just going to be some days you're at 5%. You're going to get through the day.
Yeah.
But you're at 5%. That's okay. And so when you write it down, and you look at the positive, the negative, the pros, the cons, the good and bad, when those days happen, or when you start second guessing your decision, you're able to go back and reflect on it and say, okay, I knew there were going to be days like this, but I'll get through it. And I think that's the reason why it's so important. And I think it helps us to stay anchored in that decision so that we really don't get too far off course.
That's a great point. For those that are just coming in, you are watching Cyrus Webb Presents. I'm back with Dr. Teresa A. Smith, or Dr. TAS as we know her here. We're discussing her book, Transformation. Now, the book Transformation came out in 2021. During 2021, we covered the first 5 messages that she has in the book. We're doing a 1-hour recap today. We're actually halfway through our hour already, TAS. We've covered the first 2 of those messages. The first one is change is challenging. Something I think a lot of us have learned if we try to change anything. But also the second one we're just covering was free will. And it's an interesting third connection with this next one. Message is primary focus, TAS. And in that, you asked the questions. And these, again, are personal questions for us all. What is your primary focus? Is it material wealth? The impression others have of you? Is it God? Have you heard the saying, fake it until you make it? And then you say this statement. When God is your primary emphasis, you understand who he created you to be. So I want to talk about that because I think that this is an interesting midway point for us here as we're kind of thinking about these. So we went through change is challenging. We then discussed the gift that sometimes feel like a curse of free will. But now we have primary focus. How did you decide that primary focus was going to be third instead of first?
Meaning third instead of the first message?
Right.
Cyrus, I think for me, when I was putting them in order, I wanted to just get it out there because let's see how can I say this a little more succinct. If I put primary focus there first, then it wouldn't have given us permission to accept that change was going to be challenging because I'm already talking about my primary focus. So the fact that I'm not having a hard time getting there, it's like, well, how can you have a hard time? Because you already know what your primary focus is. But let's be real, change is going to be challenging. And then I got a choice. Either I'm going to do it or I'm not going to do it. But now we're looking at the primary focus. So I thought it was better to lay a foundation to get to primary focus so that once we begin to delve into that, I already know the other two. So the fact that I'm not having to sift through stuff to get to the primary focus, I know that's going to be hard. And then I know I'm going to have to make some decisions because my primary focus at the beginning may not be what it is 2 or 3 weeks or 6 months into something. So that's the reason why I laid the foundation. Really, it's just giving you permission to be like, is it this? Is it that? Is something wrong with me? No. You are normal. You are a human being. And to get to your primary focus in any aspect of your life, it's going to cause some heart palpitations. You're going to have some challenges because you're going to have to change, most likely, who you are, or at least your thought processes about certain things.
Yeah. Let me tell you what I thought about as a reader. I wanted to hear, because you wrote it, I wanted to hear what you thought. Let me tell you what I thought when I was prepping for this. That a lot of times when we're thinking about, especially at the beginning of the year, a lot of people make resolutions, right? And they may say, I want to do this, I want to lose weight, or I want to go here, or do something. I think the realization of what it takes to do that, right, is one thing. What I thought about when I was prepping for this today, Taz, was a lot of times the reason why people start on January 1st and then on January 5th they're done is because they did exactly what we talked about here. They wanted something that they didn't actually really understand why they wanted it or if they even needed it. So that means the focus wasn't right for it. So I think it makes perfect sense as the reader. For me, I'm just curious as for you, since you wrote it, why. But I thought, you know what? Then by the time I get to the third message, it's like, okay, this is why I'm having an issue with this. I don't have my focus right. The reason why I keep going in this hamster wheel is because my focus isn't right. So how important was that for you to identify what the focus was?
So it was very important because as I was prepping for this today, I use in this particular message, I use an analogy about a jar. And, I was thinking about it in reverse. And sometimes, and this is just the way I looked at it, guys, it's not anybody else, but you're supposed to put the rocks in, the gravel, the sand, and the water. And I thought about it for me. And I realized what I had been doing was I had been putting the water in the jar. Then I would put the sand. And then I was putting a little gravel in. And then I was trying to put the rocks in. Now understand the rocks represent the primary focus. For me, the water was the communities, all the stuff that I do in the community. Then the sand was my family. And then I was the gravel. And then the rock was God's plan for me. Well, when you put it in that order, there's no room for God's plan.
Yeah.
There's no room. And it was like, so you've been at this the wrong way, but I didn't see it. And so it really goes back to what you were saying as a reader. You realize, it's like, well, what is the primary focus? And I think sometimes we're so fragmented that we think we know, and it's a good focus, but at the primary focus. And then and I shouldn't say it's easy for us to not stay committed, but it sort of is. We feel bad for a little bit, but then we just move on. And like you said, by the end of January, I was supposed to be doing that. Oh, I forgot about that because it never was the primary focus. And so, like I said, when I was prepping, I realized that I had been putting things in the wrong order. I thought I was putting them in the right order, but I wasn't. And it was like, oh no, gotta change that.
And that's the thing. That's why these conversations are so great. And I'm curious for the audience. Let us know, have you grappled with that too? Thinking that what was supposed to be the primary focus ended up being the thing you didn't have the room for. And it goes to something else you said, Ty. So this really does all flow together. It doesn't mean it's bad.
No.
All the things you mentioned, the community, the family, all of that is good stuff. But it all has to do with the priorities that you give it.
Yes.
If it's going to work out. And that's what I hope our audience does, is because a lot of times we do beat ourselves up. And that's why what you said earlier makes even more sense with this, because none of these are bad things. These aren't bad things that we want to do, but determining how far we get with them will determine what order we put them in, and what we kind of make our primary focus. Now, let's just say, because for some people, and look, we're a judgment-free zone here.
Yeah.
They may look at their lives and say, well, yeah, material wealth is my primary focus.
Mhm.
that
Nothing wrong with
that
that.
is my thing. That's what I want. Now, I've met people last year, Taz, who, I was like, you know what? They always talk about, I don't say this out loud, of course, but they're always talking about money. They're always talking about money. And then it was in a conversation, and I'm glad I didn't say anything before. They told me why. They wanted to make sure their wife didn't have to work. And so I was like, oh, that's why they focus so much on the money. It's because that's the end, a means to an end for them
Yes.
to get what
Mhm.
they want, which is their wife not to have to work,
Mhm.
and for, wife to be able to stay home if she wants to. And so I was like, okay, so how important is that honesty for us, Taj? Because we may say, oh yeah, God is the center of my life, but let's just say our actions don't show that. How
Mhm.
important is that honesty for us to say, if that is not the case, that we own that and then really try to figure out how our primary focus can get us what we want?
I think it's very important, Cyrus. And like you said, if material wealth is what drives you, there's nothing wrong with that. But the thing is knowing what your focus is and what your driver is and understanding why it's your driver.
Yeah.
Now, the question becomes for that person could potentially be, you want to make sure that your wife doesn't have to work. Why is that so important to you?
Mm-hmm.
Because regardless of what it is that is our motivator, it's important to know why it's the motivator. And you see, that's what I learned over the last 6 months, why something was my motivator. And once I understood why it was my motivator, and I realized, to be quite honest, I don't need that anymore. It no longer has any interest to me.
Mm-hmm.
But that took me understanding why. And I had to wrestle with that for a little while to figure out why it was. So whatever the primary focus is, understand that it's always more intricate than just what we hear and see on the surface. Because I think it's great, for even for individuals who want wealth so that their family doesn't have to struggle, so they can put their nieces or their children through school. I think that's a wonderful thing. But the question is, why is that so important to you and why does that drive you? Because what happens once you've got the wealth and you can do all that? Are you still going to have some crevices like the mason jar that still are not filled? And if so, then the question becomes, can we make sure that we take care of those crevices in a positive way versus a negative way?
Love that. Love that. Your Glean recap for message 3, and again, we're talking about primary focus here, everyone, for this third message is determine the focal point in your personal, career, and spiritual lives. Then make sure God is guiding you in each. So here's the thing, and we might as well just call a spade here. For people of faith, we all know that we're supposed to live God-centered lives.
Yes.
That's just, there is
Yeah.
no other,
Yeah.
because if we're not, if we're saying we're a person of faith, nothing's going to work out anyway.
Nope. Nope.
So let's talk to people of faith for a second, because that's
Yeah.
really what this Glee recap is about.
Yeah.
For us, if we say that we are people of faith, ties, why is it important for us to make sure that we have everything else in its proper place?
Well, God, as you said, God is at the center. If you think about the trilogy, it's God, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. He's at the beginning. And if we make him an afterthought, then as you said, nothing is ever going to work out. He's in every part of our DNA. If you want to look at DNA being the part that does our personal life, the part that's our career, the part that's our spiritual, if you leave him out, then you're out of balance. Now, I'm not telling you to go to your job tomorrow, any day, and start quoting scriptures to people and start preaching to them. I'm not saying that. I'm not talking about your job. I'm talking about you. He
Right.
got to dwell in you. And you don't have to do those things in order for people to understand that there's something different about you. They're going to know there's something different because of your character. They may not understand what it is, but you do. And if you think about it, Christ came into the world so that we could have life and have it more abundantly. But let's look at that in plain English. Christ came into the world and then he died on the cross. He got up the third morning so that when we dealing with these people who get on our nerves, we got something to fall back on so that we don't lose our cool and tell them what we really think about them. Did she say that? Yeah. Because that's in your personal life, that's in your work life, it's in your friend life, it's in your community life, everywhere. Because there has to be something that can sustain you when you can't do anything in the human realm to make it better. So that's when we talk about him being that focal. He's that quiet voice that's in your ear saying, just smile. Just smile your way through it. It's going to be okay. And that helps you to survive. And now I'm talking about careers and things like that. But it's the same way when you have made a choice that, okay, January 1st, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week. Not every day, just 3 times a week. And the 3rd week in January, you don't go at all. Well, well, you can give up, but the voice may say, just go back on Monday. It'll be fine. Just go back on Monday. And you go on Monday. Then you go another day. And then maybe you go another day the next week. You don't make it 3 weeks, 3 days that week. But that's that voice that keeps encouraging you to continue. And you make it to March. And then after you make it to March, you can keep going the whole year. So that's the reason why him being that focal point is so important. We as people of faith have to look to something that really we can't explain to help us to survive in this thing we call life.
Yeah. And the question and the reflect and connect that I want to mention for that one is, it's a very personal question, but it is one I think we have to ponder ourselves. Have you accepted God's plan? I think that is it. And I think, again, that's a question that only our audience can answer. Because, again, as we're talking about primary focus, as TAS mentioned, as you're looking at your own life, as other people are looking at you, it should be obvious what your primary focus is. It should be an obvious thing what you're spending your time with, what it is that you're spending your efforts on. And so, again, only you can answer that. No one can answer that question for you. So, TAS, we went through the change is challenging. We then went to free will. We now looked at primary focus. That leads us to the 4th message, ironically leading in what you just mentioned about the exercise example, staying on track. That's message number 4. I want to talk about that because there are days we get it wrong. I learned a lot about myself in 2021. And I learned that some people let me get away with things. I'm a fairly blunt person for people who know me personally. But I don't mean anything maliciously. But I am a person who, to make sure there's not any ambiguity, I'm very clear in what I say. And I learned, you know what? That may not have come out just right. That may, I meant well, but hey, I'm working on that. So I mess up sometimes on that, TAS. I mess up. And that's why I tell people, if you really want to know what I think, just ask me. I'm not going to volunteer. I do the same thing. Just ask me, because otherwise, I'm just going to listen and do what she said, smile, and just be there. But what should we do, TAS, when it comes to realizing we've gotten off track? How can we get back to a system in message 4 of getting back on track and staying there?
Well, what I tend to do sometimes, Cyrus, is it really goes back, we were talking about it earlier. We talked about the pros and cons, the positive and negatives of your decision. But sometimes what I will do when I find myself getting off track, I will begin to list what I wanted. You hear me, guys? I said what I wanted, where I'm at. And then if I think I can figure out what I need, because then what I'm able to do is see where I'm at and then what it takes to get to the end. And for me, that kind of helps me to bridge the two, because otherwise I find that I'll start, and I don't really do this, but because I don't beat myself up, because I just know better. But I find that sometimes people will begin to beat themselves up. And my thing is, I only give myself a few moments to, can you hear me, Tom?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? You can hear me? Yeah.
I can hear you. I'm just getting this feedback from somewhere. But I give myself a few moments to wallow and whatever, and then I move on, because you're going to get off track. And so I recognize that. And so, like I said, what I do is I look at what I originally wanted, where I am, and then what I probably realize I need. And then I try to bridge it. I do it a step at a time. Because if I try to do too much at one point, I'm not going to be successful.
TAS, give me just 1 second. I'm going to try to check something real quick here. I can still hear. Can you hear me, TAS?
I can hear you. I'm still getting some sort of feedback.
Okay, I'm going to try to check it on my end to see if it may be something on my end. But I want to mention this when it comes to this point. What would you say to our audience then, Taz, when it comes to how they can stay on track when going through the process? Because I think that is the big thing there. How you can do it with everything else that's going on.
One strategy that I utilize is, and you can do it on a daily basis, but usually I do it like once a week. I will write down what has been a challenge for me that week, and then I will write down what I did to address that.
Hmm.
And then I will note something that was positive that happened. And the reason I do that is because I want to recognize that, yes, there were some struggles, but then I want to also look at what I did to rise to the occasion to meet the challenge, and then what was positive. Because otherwise, you focus so much on what was challenging, you forget that you did overcome some things and you had a great week. So I do that, and I just write in a little journal. And then what happens is, if I'm having like a down day and I'm like, oh, I want to go to pieces, I pull it out and I read it. And then my mind sort of like resets. It's like a computer, it resets, and then I go on.
Yeah. And so I think this is the big thing for me when it comes to this particular point, Ties. Does it sound better?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. I think I needed to just adjust my phone for some reason. I'm not moving, but but what I wanted to mention from this particular message is this is what you said. Longevity requires an understanding of expectancy and a commitment to persistence. And I think that is a thing for us to realize that, again, going really to message one, Ties, that this is something, it makes sense that you may tire out because it is a process. It's not something that you'll ever stop doing. I guess the main thing for our audience here is to make sure they don't lose their joy in the process, because if they lose the joy, in my opinion, and you can chime in on this, that's a way that they will then stop or revert back to another course, right?
Absolutely, Simon. And then the other thing with that is having a realistic understanding of what joy is. I often talk about, don't use someone else's barometer to measure your happiness or your joy or whatever. So what's joyful for you, it may be one small increment, and that's okay. It's not always going to be something huge. It's not always going to be you get an unexpected check that you didn't know was coming, or you run into someone or someone calls you that you really want to hear from. It's not always something like that. But understanding that it will be little things that will show you that you're headed in the right direction. And to celebrate that, what I've learned over the last 6 months also is celebrate that. And, I know this will resonate with people. We always knew that tomorrow wasn't promised, but we see that more now than ever before. And so it's like, oh, I don't want to bring out these dishes for the house. Just use them anyway. I don't want to cook this today. Oh, no, cook it today. I don't want to wear this today. No, you wear it today. Because you don't know if you're going to have that opportunity. And that's what celebrating is all about. Celebrate the little things, because those little things become huge things over time.
Yeah. Such a great message. You mentioned in the Gleam recap for this one, it's the Scriptures, Philippians 3:15 and 16. And I love this because the paraphrase at the end is, now that we're on the right track, let's stay on it. And that's it. If you're doing good, and again, we're going to slip up. I'm going to say something that may be offensive to somebody. It may not meant to be offensive. And someone may say to me, Cyrus, you know what? That didn't really come out right. Or I didn't, that I think you could have said that in a different way. And that's for me to be able to acknowledge. And like we were saying earlier, to acknowledge it, apologize, and to course correct, and to be mindful of that in my situation. But for other people, it may be something else. Whatever that thing might be for them. But that's why I think as we're talking about this, Taj, I think our audience will see this is all very personal. Because what I'm dealing with is maybe not what other people are dealing with. What you're dealing with is not what other people are dealing with. Whatever that thing is that we need to change, because it's not always professional. It's not always personal. It may be something more psychological, more spiritual, whatever that thing is, to make that the case. So that brings us into our reflect and connect. I love this one. Why is perseverance essential to your expectations? Talk to us about that, Todd.
Without perseverance, expectations can never manifest. We have expectations for ourselves, others have expectations for us also. But in order to reach expectations, whether it's goals, whatever, it's something in the future. In order to achieve that, you have to be persistent. Think about it as a car goes up and down a hill, down the curve. If you are not consistent, when you go up the hill, you may say, I want to go back down that hill because it's going to be a drop down, or I can't climb another hill because the last time I tried to climb up, I just didn't make it. I started climbing back. I can't take another curve because that curve that I need to go through the last time, it really threw me for a loop. Well, that's life. That's life. And if you are not consistent, if you cannot motivate yourself, because external motivation is nice, but you need intrinsic motivation, something that only you can do. Because those days when you can't get out of bed, or you just can't face anyone else because of all the things that are happening, people can't pull you out of bed. They can literally pull you out, but are you going to be productive? In order to be productive and to be emotionally sound to do whatever you have to do, you've got to have it within you. So, to me, perseverance is something that we need to cultivate, and we need to nurture that, and we need to protect it, because it's something that helps us to evolve into who we're going to evolve into.
There you go. Well, I say, if you're just tuning in, you're watching Cyrus What Presents. We're here with Dr. Teresa Smith, Dr. TAS, discussing the 5 messages that begin her book, Transformation, that's out now on Amazon. We've already covered 4. We're in our last one, TAS, and that is persecution. Now, this is an interesting one. We started off enough with change being challenging, but then you go to persecution. So I want to talk about this one, because in this one, you give some of your own examples of things that you've been able to see. But you also say this: we are to love those who persecute us just as Christ did, and not return wrong for wrong. We all go through challenges, but why is the way we handle those challenges important for us, Toss?
I think it speaks to character. I was at a movie not too long ago, and I said to my mother, I'm going to butcher this. At home, there's a mortician. I'm always drinking the saying.
Me too.
We think it's spirits that's nice. But there's a mortician, and I can remember years ago, my mother said to me, well, those are poor. And he has a way of doing a service. And one of the things that he says is reputation is who people say you are. Character is who you are. And I watched a movie recently. I almost want to say it was the King's movie, but I could have it wrong. And when I heard the person say it, I said to my mother afterwards, I said, this is what I just heard in this movie. And I said it was so fitting, because reputation is who people say you are. Character is who you are. And when it comes to persecution, we're all going to be persecuted. And so therefore, your perception of who you are is so important, because who other people perceive you to be, that's not who you are. That can either sank you, but it won't make you. Now hear me, I said it can sank you, meaning it can bring you down, but it won't make you. Because you have to know who you are. And when you know who you are, then you can control your behavior. And you can look at persecution in the face and say, you hit, where's the song? Hit me with your best shot, or whatever it is. Because again, you know who you are. And that is so important. And then it goes back to that other green with having God as your focal, because you can't do that if you don't have the right the focal point. I'm sorry. You just can't do it. But again, knowing who you are, because, all that the enemy can do, and the enemy, you're not going to win with this. I hear the message, but you're not going to win, because this is important. The enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And he comes in our personal lives, he comes in our spiritual life, he comes in our jobs, he comes in our communities, he comes all the time. And he comes in many ways. And he will continue to come unless you're strong enough to understand that what people say don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
What people do really don't matter. It's what you know to be true.
Yeah.
Because you don't give people your power. And you see, when you get into the persecution, you've given your power away. We have power because Christ came and died and got up. We have power, but we give it away because we don't understand it. And the devil, whomever you want to say it is, the same people come, different faces, the same tricks. They keep coming doing the same thing over and over. Now, some people would say, well, there's something wrong with you. Well, there could be something wrong with you. But why do people keep doing the same thing?
Yeah.
Because, again, you're trying to change, but they don't want you to change. They want you to stay where they like you to be, where they're comfortable with you. And this book, some people are probably coming to me, and you haven't looked at what you're coming to me in that moment. There are going to be individuals this year who are trying to change their lives. And it's going to appear that everything is stacked against you. I never promised anything, but I will tell you this. If you get this book, and if you reach out to me, getting ready to come, Cyrus alluded to it about my group, you'll be able to withstand it. That you will be able to do. Because change must come. And for some individuals, it must come this year. And the persecutions that you've been experiencing over your life, it has to stop. And this book, because this is God's book, it's not my book, this book can help you overcome that persecution. And Cyrus, we probably have 3 minutes. I'm giving it back to you.
Well, let me say this, too, in connection with this, what you just said. The other thing that I hope our audience takes away from this hour, and as we go now into these last 5 messages, TAS, is that they're not alone.
No.
We're strong also because we have each other. We all are going through the transformation. So to be able to be a part of a community, that is, I think, a powerful thing as well. And TAS is going to be offering that to you. So let's mention one other Reflect and Connect with this one, TAS. And that is, this is an interesting one. Why do you think people choose to bully others? And I think what I thought was so interesting about that question is, in many ways, you're encouraging us to be even empathetic, almost like when Jesus said to bless those who curse you, right? Why is that an important reflection point for us, to think about why others do what they do?
Hurt people. Powerless people want power over others. So it's out of their own needs, it's out of the impetus, it's out of those crevices that they didn't feel. It's out of them not really having a primary focus. Because think about it, if I really had a primary focus, I wouldn't have time to be trying to hurt anybody else.
Yeah.
Christ had a primary focus. It was to come and die for us. He didn't try to hurt anybody. He only came to heal. And I think that people who hurt, people who bully, they have some need that has not been met. And so they meet that need by hurting other people.
Yeah. It's a great message. We did it, TAS. 5 messages in 1 hour. Next week, we'll have message number 6. We'll have a half hour with that. And we'll be continuing on through the book. Again, it's Transformation is the title of the book. You see it there by Dr. Teresa A. Smith or Dr. TAS. You can get it through Amazon.com. Also, if you guys notice in my stories, you notice my Amazon storefront is in my stories. CyrusWebStore.com is in my storefront. You all can get it there to make it easy for you. Dr. TAS has also been posting in her story the Amazon link as well, so you guys can go there. And TAS, how can they stay connected with you?
The best way to stay connected to me is to reach out to me at Dr. Teresa Smith on Instagram. Instagram is my new home, so you will see me all over Instagram in 2022.
All right. Dr. TAS, it was an honor and a pleasure to spend this hour with you. I tell you, we did it. We went through them. We got it done. That's what we did. We had a primary focus, TAS. That's what we did. TAS, I love you. Looking forward to continuing these conversations with you. And to our audience, thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Cyrus Web Presents. If you missed any of the hour, don't worry. The replay will be up on our pages. I know TAS will be sharing it as well. But make sure you guys get the book and join the community, because I think the big takeaway here is whatever you're going through, You're not alone in going through it, and you don't have to go through this challenging time alone. Dr. TAS has written a book. She's building a community to kind of bring you guys together, to encourage you, to inspire you, to push you, to help you get to where you want to go. But it's up to you to take advantage of that opportunity. So make sure you guys get your copy of Transformation. And until next week at the same time, we'll see you guys then. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.